Hey, thank you again for joining us here on Baseball Biz on Deck. This is Mark. We're going to start off today with part of an interview with Mr. Larry Rothschild. Matt Germain and I had the great pleasure of interviewing Larry this week, and man, it is exciting to understand what's going on inside of a manager and a coach and a player and how he observes the changes in the game and the great history of what he's been able to participate with. We are very thankful because Larry was the first manager of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. But amidst all this insanity, we had the great privilege, Matt Germain and I, of speaking with Mr. Larry Rothschild, and we're going to go ahead and start with part one of that interview right now. Well, that's perfect. That's about how the show starts every week, with a little insanity, a little laughter, and welcome everybody. We're very fortunate here today on Baseball Biz on Deck to have Mr. Larry Rothschild. And this guy, man, I can't thank you enough, Larry. It was a pleasure meeting you at the Tampa Baseball Museum a few months back. But knowing full well that you were there to light the torch for the first days of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And so welcome to the show.
Well, great. It's good to be here. And, you know, it's that time of year. Baseball's getting cranked up. So it's a good time.
Yeah, you've got such a stellar career. And I mean, you've been in Florida for a few different reasons of baseball. I mean, one, obviously the Rays, but then again, the Marlins. And lest I forget, FSU. You were pitching for the Nose, weren't you, man?
Yes. And then spring training with Cincinnati was in Tampa.
Duh. Yeah.
So, and, you know, Detroit was Lakeland. So a lot of great memories in Florida.
Jeez. No, it's something to do down there at Joker Marchant Field. I'm going to get down there a couple of times during spring training. But I do want to bring from a race perspective. Actually, looking from baseball a business perspective too, I always know that, well, baseball players, their path to getting into the game is, through a lot of hard work and then being taken up to the show. And then several years before they actually are able to be a free agent. Now, a manager does not have something like that in place. That manager doesn't have necessarily a Scott Boras out there working with teams and something like. So, as a manager, when you were being picked by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, how did those conversations go? Who was talking with who to make that happen?
Well, when I was hired, I had just finished the World Series. And with the Marlins, which it went 7 games, 11 innings, the last game. So I got done after the season and got called the next day to go interview. So it was quick. And then the expansion draft was shortly after that. So I had no time. And they had already put together a lot of things. And, you know, Chuck and I talked about it on the airplane out to the expansion draft. That's basically the time we had. And there were some things that I had my opinions on, let's say, but some of it was too late. So they had already formatted a lot of the plans, which I wish I could have gotten involved in earlier, but it's the way things ran right at that time.
Yeah, I was wondering about that if you'd had a chance to be able to touch it before then. But so it sounds much like a lot of managers, if you've been coming on to another team, that it's like, here's the goods. We've already got them for you. You don't necessarily get the chance to select that before you sign on with that team. But
I think in today's world, that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back, even if a manager came into a new situation, he would have a lot of control, you know, obviously working with the GM, but over the players he wanted there and to put the roster together so it worked for him. You know, Lou Piniella or Jim Leyland and guys like that, you weren't going to tell them what roster they needed on the field to win. And that's really changed in today's game.
Yeah.
Ask you about that though. Lou Piniella, I mean, you were his pitching coach, am I right?
Yeah.
What was that like? Explain it, because we've all seen how I guess you could call it opinionated it can be. So how was it to work under Lou Piniella?
It was great. I mean, Lou and I had a relationship before that. We were with Cincinnati, And then I went to the Cubs. I was at the Cubs when he came to the Cubs. And we won the World Series in 1990 in Cincinnati. It was my first year coaching in the major leagues at a pretty young age. Lou had, he gave me a lot of stuff that I did, and I learned a lot that year. And it was great. Him and I became very close and still are. And the word on the street a lot is, he was really tough on pitching coaches. It wasn't just pitching coaches, he could be tough on anybody, but what he wanted to do was make sure that you knew what you needed to do and you had the confidence to do it no matter what. And he found that out really quickly. And if you didn't, there wasn't going to be a place for you. So we got along great. He wanted your opinion. And at times you wouldn't think he did, but he always did. And he listened and he ran the team, and that's the way it should be. And everybody knew that. And really, there was a lot of genius to the way he did things. And, if you look at him, you just think it's a kind of a brute force out front and will his way into winning. But it was a lot more than that. Same with Jim Leyland, he was one of the, Lou and him, for me to work for, they were great managers. And Lou should be in the Hall of Fame without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy that he's not. And if it goes another, however long, and it's post-mortem, I think that's a tragedy, and baseball should be ashamed of itself.
I couldn't agree more. And the reason I asked that is because I feel like when we talk to managers, or I haven't talked to a huge amount, but it seems to me like more than any other role in baseball, they are people who love to learn from others, and they cherish that and they value that. So speak to us like your background, right? Because I know a lot of people can jump into the fray and say, okay, well, this is what happened in Tampa when you were manager, but how did you get there, and what were your influences like as a kid and then through high school and into college football?
Well, it was interesting because south side of Chicago, you didn't play a lot of baseball during the high school season. And I transferred my junior year, and it was, I had skipped third grade, so I was a year ahead of myself. And even if I were in the grade I was supposed to be in, I would have been small. And, I developed really late. So my senior year, I grew a lot and ended up pitching that summer, and it just all came together. And I went to Florida State and played for a coach, Jack Stallings, who was an incredible teacher. If there's one guy I can draw on that really taught me as a player, it was Jack. He was incredible. He was short and had a booming voice, and you could hear him all over the field. He really was great to me. And then, I ended up signing with the Reds and got into their system at a time when it was as good as any in baseball. Their minor league system was really good. And signed and went to Billings, and then ended up in Eugene after a couple of weeks. We won the league there, went to Double-A. I went to Instruction League that year, and we won the league. And then I got promoted to Double-A, which was kind of rare for the Reds. Usually you went step by step in A-ball. And I ended up going to Double-A my first full season in Three Rivers, Canada, which was great. And, the year, I had a really good year there. And they taught baseball, and you did things the right way. A guy named Ron Plaza ran the minor leagues. He was a great, great teacher. So I was pretty lucky. That was really 3 out of 4 years growing into baseball, because in high school I was an afterthought, really. But I always knew, that I always hoped and believed that it would happen, and it did. And it was a lot of hard work, and it was a lot of rejection. And I knew in the end that, it was I don't know why. I had no reason. People thought I was crazy. But maybe I am. I don't know. But it worked out. And I was very fortunate to be around the people I was. And then, as a player with the Reds and got Rule 5 by the Tigers, ended up playing at the end of 2 seasons with Detroit. Sparky was there then, and Roger Craig was the pitching coach. And, just a lot of really good experience. A lot of years in AAA. After I went to Double-A, I went to AAA, and I got stuck on repeat for a long time in AAA. But It was all learning, and it all helped as I, went into coaching.
Wow. I want to take a small little trip back to Chicago for a moment because I know early origins with you. You were a Yankees fan in
Hmm.
Chicago. How did that come to be?
Well, my dad served in World War II, and he was in the Navy, but ended up on a transport ship. And my dad was from Germany and left Germany. He had to leave Germany. He was Jewish.
Yeah.
And so everything was taken from him, and they ended up in Chicago. And he enlisted right away. He wanted to go fight in Europe, in Germany.
Wow.
But being German in those days, they didn't trust that you weren't, completely in line with the U.S. But so he ended up going to the Pacific and fighting there. And on the ship was Hank Bauer. It was a Marine unit that was on the ship, which he ended up serving with. Although he had enlisted in the Navy, he ended up with that unit in the Marines, and he became very close with Hank Bauer. And Hank taught him about baseball, and he developed a love of baseball. And he actually would come to the World Series in New York after the war because Hank would have him here. And, he came to the World. My first glove came from New York
Wow.
because he was up here at the World Series and brought it back. And actually brought two gloves back because I was ambidextrous and nobody knew what I was. So anyway, so he was a Yankee fan because of that. I became a huge Yankee fan. And in those days, it wasn't real popular on the south side of Chicago
Mhm.
because the White Sox and the Yankees had a real competitive nature. And so it worked out great for me because I could take all my White Sox cards and trade them for Yankee cards, which, and we ended up doing okay against the White Sox. So, but it was, I mean, I watched the Yankees. I read their box scores. I watched them whenever I could and would go to Comiskey Park when they played there and find ways to sneak in and watch games. And so, yeah, in those days you could kind of do that, but that wouldn't happen today.
No. No. It's a little more secure, but I think about that though as a young man, and that years later there you are, what is a pitching coach for the Yankees.
Hmm.
And I think, my gosh, I admire everything you did as a pitching coach, especially when I look at the folks that you're working with too. What you got, Mariano and Sabathia there, and I mean, as far as pitching, and then up looking across the dugout, I guess you'll see Rodriguez and Jeter, and I was
Hmm.
like, my gosh, man, to be part of that whole cadre of heroes, as far as I'm concerned, that had to be something when you started out as a Yankees fan as a child.
Well, the first time I was in uniform in the stadium was when we played there when I was with Tampa,
Yeah.
and we went and played the Yankees. I hadn't played there with any of the other teams I was with, and it was the old stadium, and you just walk in, and it's one of the times in your life where you're just like, wow, this
Mhm.
is this is beyond anything. And my dad, I mean, when I took the job, uh, I had got him a hat. I didn't tell him that until I saw him, and we had a dinner for him for his birthday, and I handed him the hat. I said, I'm going to be with the Yankees, and he was, I left the Cubs with a contract, and I'm from Chicago, so being home was great for those years, and Wrigley Field was really special.
Yeah.
Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium was special, but the years I had in Wrigley were maybe the best years I had in baseball.
Wow.
But it was special to be able, my dad dreamed of me being in a Yankee uniform, and I, I always wore hoodies and, didn't wear the full uniform a lot. And he used to call and say, would you wear the uniform? Just because he wanted to see me in the uniform. And I would, but, that was special being in Yankee Stadium and knowing that his devotion to the Yankees, and I grew up as a Yankee fan. That was really special. And then to come to the Yankees and witness it firsthand was special. A
Yeah.
lot of things had changed during the course of my tenure there with the analytical part of the game, and probably around the time Joe left, Joe Girardi, and even Joe Torre before that, it started, but it got really progressed. Like my last two Yankees, it was, on steroids. Not me, but the analytical program.
Yeah.
So it was crazy.
So in terms of like you went through that entire transition essentially from the all the way through the 70s, 80s, and 90s and into, like you said, the steroid era, really, where
Mm-hmm.
there were some pitchers that were found to be doing steroids as well. But in terms of the actual pitching, like when we're thinking about pitching, there's a ball, there's a grip, there's a motion, there's so the transition through those periods. What do you think of pitching as a whole and where it stands today in comparison to where it was when you started?
Um, if I were just shooting from the hip, I'd say it's not pitching anymore, it's throwing.
Mhm.
How hard can you throw the baseball? And the catcher sets up in the middle with the glove right down the middle of the plate, waist high, which I was, you just didn't do that.
Yeah.
And you learn how to hit spots. And, obviously strike one has always been the most important pitch and all those things. But in today's game, it's more just, a kid that can throw 98 or 100 is going to get every chance in the world to pitch. Where you have a kid throwing 93 and can really pitch, he's going to get buried. And I know that firsthand from some people that I know. And it's a shame, you can strike out guys at the same level or higher level and not walk guys as the hard throwing guys. And it doesn't matter. You won't get credit for it. And that, I think, the injuries are obviously a big part of it. It used to be they thought that breaking balls caused the Tommy John injuries. And then, I don't know, 8 years ago, they decided that fastballs were more a cause for the concern with the Tommy John. And I think that's probably a factor. But I think overthrowing the baseball is a real problem. And throwing it when you're not ready and you're not developed. If you start these programs, where you're throwing, whether it's weighted balls or using the weightlifting, I was told when I signed, don't touch a weight, and I'm not sure that's wrong. For maintenance, I understand it, but now these guys are bigger and stronger. The muscles aren't big that are getting hurt, and it's you overpower them with the other muscles, and that's what's going to happen. And it's not that natural to throw a baseball the way we do. So the more stress, and the other thing I see, I'll diverse a little bit, but all the injuries in baseball now, and I like the biomechanics stuff that they do. I think it's problematic because everything a player does is measured now.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to work on something, it's getting measured, and it's getting measured. You can't just 3/4 and just repeat stuff and then okay, because it's getting measured. Whether you're swinging, I think the hamate injuries early in spring, that's partly because of what goes on. If you look in a batting cage today, every swing is measured. How hard you've hit the ball, how and get the A swing off every time. Well, make an appointment with the doctor because you're going to end up there with the orthopedic. I think that's a big part of it. The first year that they had the pitch clock, it was funny to me because in spring training, they had all these machines measuring everything. So a guy would throw a pitch and it would be 2 minutes where he's looking at it and it's being measured. And then what are we going to do? And then the season starts and you've got to throw the ball right away. And you're doing two different things. I mean, so I kind of laughed at that, but there's a time and a place for that. And it's good to work on stuff in the bullpen, but the last 15 pitches you throw should be kind of a game situation, I really believe. And whatever you're learning, try to incorporate that into what you would do in a game.
So I had a couple of ideas that I think would work in terms of helping pitchers kind of reset, I guess we could call it, right? And one of them is what you just spoke of, which is the velocity factor. I don't think it should be displayed or measured anywhere in the stadium.
I agree.
I think it should be posted after the game if they want. They can use it for savant and look back on. But I think it would take away, especially for young players, because I remember Brent Honeywell showing up in spring training with the Rays and blowing out his arm. And I knew
Hmm.
because it was the first time he was on the mound. He was throwing as hard as he could and trying to look good in front of everybody and saying, "Hey, look, I'm arriving.
Yep.
It's gonna be a
Well,
season."
that and couple that with there's three guys throwing at a time,
Yes.
and who knows how hard those guys, and who knows what shape they're in, and then that guy next to you. If
Mhm.
you're a young pitcher, your first spring,
Yeah.
and you're seeing that, and the pitching coach, everybody's standing there, and you may not be ready to, but you're going to air it out. So, though,
Mhm.
you're exactly right. I don't know what effect it would have on the fans if you didn't let them see. When a guy hits 100, everybody, wow. And the orthopedic surgeon's going, oh, okay, I'll sharpen the blades.
Oh, gosh.
Um, so, and that's, I know, an over exaggeration, but
No, not probably not.
You're not
but
wrong.
so the first spring that they put the machines in the bullpen during spring training, I told them to take them out
Yeah.
for the first week, because I knew what we were up against with three guys throwing at a time. And I had guys so early, I tried to make it just individual, especially guys I knew might be at risk,
Mhm.
or guys rehabbing. I'd have them come early and throw, and that way separate them out and not have to, watch three guys try to match each other. But those machines and guys coming into spring training early and they're being measured right up. What are you measuring? Because this guy's not ready for it. So what do well, we want to get a background and compare it. What are you comparing it to? The next spring when he starts getting ready again? I mean, honestly, I said we are getting guys hurt if we're going to do this.
The only time I really agree with it is when players that haven't been picked up by a team are trying to show what they
Hmm.
can, and then they make a video. That part I get, right?
I think if you're in full shape and you're ready and you want to work on, a break, and the other pitch that the slurve, which they call, I don't know what they call it now, but unless a pitcher is naturally a lower arm slot, that puts a lot of stress on an elbow. I mean, you can just look at it and see where the elbow is exposed.
Right.
And that's a pitch that they're teaching a lot now.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw it, I was like, I'm just waiting for elbows to start exploding, because it's a dangerous pitch to be thrown.
What about the splitter? Because I can remember that being taboo. Basically, nobody.
Yeah. No, I was one of the first people to throw a splitter. Bruce Sutter, I watched and watched, and I had been in AAA for a while, and I'm thinking I need something different. I need to try something different.
Mhm.
So I looked at his grips and looked at everything and read everything I could, and I started goofing around with it, and I actually started throwing. And I have taught it a lot.
Mhm.
I don't think, depending on, obviously, if you throw a pitch wrong, you're exposing your elbow, but I don't think the split is any different than, say, a changeup that you might turn over a little bit,
Right.
and if you release it properly, the stress leaves the elbow. So
Mhm.
I don't think I think the problem is the torque and the velocity and all the stuff that's being done in between. There's a place for weighted balls where if you're working on deliveries but not outside throwing as far as you can throw
Yeah.
I'll leave the curse words out of this, but it's just
You're
You're
fine here.
yeah. I mean, and individual guys can do what, but now they've got, if you're a kid throwing 92, 93, they want you to throw harder. They bring you down for a velocity camp.
Mhm.
So you're doing a couple of things there. You're telling a kid, you're not good enough the way you are, even though you might be the best pitcher in the system as far as pitching. And you're having a guy try to throw as hard as he can
Yeah.
all the time. And that's an injury waiting to happen and a mechanical failure going to happen.
So
I knew, just a quick story. A friend of mine's son was in the minor leagues, 92 to 94, really, really good. Didn't ever walk anybody. I mean, could hit. They had the catchers, and he would call me once in a while. They had the catcher setting up in the middle of the plate. That's not him. I said, you can hit the corners at will the way you command the ball. So, let them, he said they won't move the catcher. I said, good. Just use the shin guards of your catcher or use the umpire's mask. You don't need to throw to the glove. Seaver did that years ago, but so there's different ways to do it, but I didn't understand it. You've got a pitching coach now at every level. When I played, you had one going through 6 teams, and you saw them twice a year. Now and so you can't individualize a program for a kid and go to his strengths and weaknesses. So you're going to cookie cutter and say, everybody, we're going to stand in the middle of the plate and put the ball. I'll say down the middle. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking, but when I see it, I get sick. I can't believe it.
That was going to lead into my next question, which was who decides the pitch mix? Because there's a lot of people like ourselves who are on the outside, have never been in a clubhouse, don't know how that relationship goes from the catcher to the pitching coach to the team philosophy to the pitcher himself. So generally, as a player grows, it's going to change over time as they adjust. But who decides that, and how much input does the pitcher himself get, or when they first show up, especially?
It depends on the coach and it depends on the pitcher. There's 3 guys doing the pitching, but deciding pitch shape, one guy, pitch program, how to get hitters out. And then the pitching coach, I don't know, puts it together. I don't really know. Maybe, some of the mechanics, but there's somebody doing the mechanics too. Mm-hmm. So, as a pitching coach now, you're more of a coordinator than you are really. And the thing that towards the end, I started seeing that a little. And it's one of the reasons I needed to get out of the game. I wanted to be responsible for what went on the mound. And if it didn't go well, I was responsible for it. And that was fine. And I wanted the players to know where it was coming from. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want people going to the players without me knowing about it, because then you're putting out fires all the time. And it was, what's this guy trying to tell me? And it might not agree with if you sit down in a room and decide what you're going to do and go out there, and then that's what the player hears from the pitching coach, I have no problem with that. And the information's great, but too much information isn't going to get regurgitated the way you want it to get regurgitated.
And it kind of leads into one of my main questions about that relationship, because I can remember watching Yadier Molina with the Cardinals, and I would imagine that he had more input in terms of what was being called when than somebody who's the first year catcher on the team, or somebody that does the pedigree that he does. So when you're looking at the Rays as an example, they've had a revolving door when it comes to catching. How are you supposed to build any kind of, rapport with the pitchers?
I think they do a great job of it, because there's a lot of communication through their pitching coach. And I think he's a guy that he heads it up and he's responsible for it. And there's no other way around that, which is great. And it shows, they pitch well. Mm-hmm. And I think the communication is, as in anything, the communication's key. And the catcher, usually the catcher, no matter who it is going to take some time to develop a rapport with a pitcher. Because the thing I used to tell pitchers is, and I mean, I think that you're better off throwing a pitch you believe in that might be the wrong pitch than the right pitch and you don't believe in it. I know you're not going to get good results if you throw something that you don't. Now, I don't even think they think about it. So it's not, well, that was wrong, that was right. They're just out there doing what is put down. And it might be good because they don't question it anymore. But I don't know. I kind of like to have command of the guy. When I was in AAA, we had a converted third baseman that became a catcher. And he ended up being pretty good, but it was really new to him. It was the first month of the season. And I was the closer, and he came out the first time he caught me, and I had 2 strikes on a hitter, and he said, I kept shaking, and he wouldn't put down a slider, and I kept shaking. So he came out to mound, he goes, you got to throw a fastball here. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'm throwing a slider. I don't know what you're going to catch, but you're getting a slider. So put down whatever fingers you want, but I'm just telling you, I'm throwing you a slider. And he went back there and put down a fastball, and I shook once and went into my windup and threw a slider and struck the guy out. And after the game, I said, don't ever do that again, because I know what I'm going to do. I get 2 strikes on a hitter. I'm not always going to be right, but I know what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, the other thing I see, which I just think about, you go back a few years and you're in the 5th inning and the pitcher's got a 3-1 lead, a 4-1 lead, a 2-0 lead. And, he gets a guy on base with 2 outs and you take him out. You would have had a fight on the mound. And now it's just, here's the baseball. And I want that guy to fight me if I'm doing that. I mean, I used to tell people when, like a manager would get upset that a guy was pissed coming out or he showed him up. You can't show a manager up. But I used to say, I'd rather have that guy than the guy that hands you the ball to get the hell off the mound.
Yeah.
That's the guy you want on the mound. And so, there's a trade-off. And, I'd talk to guys and say, look, I understand you're pissed, but don't ever show the manager up, but stay pissed because I want you to want to finish. Mm-hmm. But there's no such thing as finish anymore. I mean, I look at Guidry, the one year when he had the unbelievable year, I think he finished 27 games. Is that all of Major League Baseball now? Maybe. I don't think there's 27 in a year, is there?
I can't believe it. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but no, not the way the game's played today.
No. And you go through, what, the Dodgers go through 45 pitchers or something?
Yeah.
I mean, what is this?
I don't know, brother. I got to tell you, when I go out there, I mean, let's face it, it is a moment that will stay with every Tampa Bay Rays fan forever, watching Blake Snell hand the ball over to Cash. And, you said something earlier about Snell approached it the way you would hope. He was angry as hell, but he was going to defer to his manager and he wasn't going to badmouth or say sour things about him, at the press conference or whatever else afterwards. But that moment just stood as a step to me. There was many others before this, I'm sure, but to me, it said this game has changed. I had to wonder in my mind, was that phone behind Kevin Cash ringing to say, hey, you got to pull this guy? Is there somebody from the front office? And if that wasn't a direct at that moment to Kevin, there was a philosophy from the front office to not let him run?
I could tell you almost every team in baseball now. I don't know what happened then. I think the Rays were at the forefront of some of this, but they give the manager a script to follow during a game. It's called, different places, it's called different things, but you want this guy to face these hitters. They don't care if it's the 5th inning. And, when the thing that I heard my last few years was wins don't matter. And I said, well, they're a result of, it's not a result of the pitcher pitching well. It's a result of a lot of other. And I said, it's really funny how the best pitchers in baseball win the most games. I mean, isn't that kind of odd, that it's due to circumstances and not, but it's always the best pitchers. Well, now they don't even let them do that, but it used to be. But I think things changed, and I remember just kind of feeling sick about it when Felix Hernandez won the Cy Young, and I think he won 11 games. And that's when I said, you know what, we're headed down the wrong road here.
Wins should be a team stat, in my opinion. They shouldn't even be related to the pitcher itself.
Anymore, yeah.
I think it's a team stat. You get the win, you get the win. And I think, it's kind of silly sometimes the way they calculate it anyway. You could have a pitcher throw 5 innings, somebody comes in, does a little bit of work, he gets the win because he happens to be in the right moment at the right time. I think there was a reliever with the Expos that had 12 wins one year because of that or something like that.
Mike Marshall.
Yeah.
But pitched every night.
Exactly.
I mean, he pitched every game. He pitched like it was crazy what he did. And then I think he went to the Dodgers, right? But I was a big fan of wins as a statistic simply for starting pitchers because it was the number one incentive when you're pitching as a starter. It was you start a game with a no-hitter, shutout, but the last thing you stand on is the win. Get the win. And you look at Jack Morris, he just knew how to win games. And he knew Like there's certain times in a game, and Leyland used to say there were 3 times in a game. If you win all 3 battles, you win the game. If you win 2 out of 3, you usually win. One
Right.
out of 3, you might win some. 0 out of 3, you're not going to win. So, as a mentality with a starting pitcher, I think it's important. You're taking a huge incentive away
Mhm.
from a starting. In today's world, you're right. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter anymore. But I would like to think that we can get back to that.
Mhm.
But it's going to have to start in minor leagues. You can't do it in the major leagues anymore. You've got to train guys in the minor leagues that look, when you go out there,
Mhm.
it's 7, 8, 9 innings.
MLB's figured out a way to add an incentive that attracts teams to start rookies from the beginning of the year on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we did that was with money and draft picks, etc.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
They were to give incentives to pitchers for hitting certain milestones, whether it's pitching 6 innings plus a certain number of time, you get a certain monetary amount, et cetera, et cetera. I think there would be incentives that they can work into contracts that could help get us there. But I,
Mm-hmm.
I remember as a fan, like watching Pedro Martinez and Roy Halladay. Pedro Martinez, I think, had one year he did 13 complete games. Roy Halladay, who threw like maybe like really low 90s, completed 9 games, uh, the majority of the seasons that he played for the Blue Jays. So I don't understand the concept of why the width and the strikeout has become such a glaring focus for a lot of teams, including the Rays, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. And so I don't know exactly how we get there, eventually, but I hope we do because they're
Well,
right. There is something about that, about a pitcher owning that game and being the person that signs off on it at the end of the day.
yeah. I tried to get a couple of places where I was to train kids in the minor leagues to pitch innings. And
Mhm.
that, look, like I learned how to pitch when I pitched tired.
Mhm.
That's when I learned how to pitch. You got to use your legs right. You got to be able to mix pitches. You better throw first pitch strikes.
Yeah.
You just have an idea and you learn. And then you also, if you're late in the game, like early in the game if a guy's on you pretty well, and late in that game, Maddox was a master of it.
Yeah.
I'm not getting beat by the guy that I know is on me pretty good. If somebody else can beat me, fine. With his case, they couldn't. In my case, they might. But so it's just the learning of how to do it, and you take it away. And now you couldn't bring guys up with that incentive because they haven't experienced it in the mind. They haven't built their arms up to be able to do that. You want them to throw a ball through a wall, maybe they can do that.
Mhm.
But and I think there's guys that can both throw hard and pitch, obviously. You got the Scoobles of the world, but you've always had those guys.
Mhm.
I don't know. I know the game's changed. I know, you know, the big argument players would always have is, Babe Ruth couldn't hit in today's game. And I would say, you've got to be kidding me. What he did when he played, like, look at the statistics in the league and then look at his statistics and what he did for everything.
Mhm.
You don't think he could adjust to what's going on today? He might hit better today. But again, you're seeing more pitchers all the time, which is hard on hitters.
Mhm.
But there's way more information, which could be hard on hitters. I mean, I think Gary Sanchez got messed up when he came up. He was a great hitter. He saw the ball. And then all of a sudden it was, I'm going to watch how a guy's tipping pitches.
Mm.
And he's watching something else instead of what he did naturally.
Right.
And the same thing catching. It was frame the ball. And framing the ball, he held it like he tried to do that so much that it really messed him up with what he needed to do instead of just being natural at it. Like it was just such a manufactured move that he'd miss balls because he's thinking about framing. He's not thinking about blocking. So then all of a sudden it was, well, he can't block. He could block when he came up. And he actually, for a young catcher, called pretty good games. And I think his head exploded. And, it's a shame because his talent at the plate was not just your run of the day, really good hitter. He was a special hitter. you know, and who knows, I may have the wrong take on that, but that's the gut feeling I had. It just, you know, too much information can confuse some guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, guys are trained now to digest information differently. You've got great athletes today, but they don't not necessarily perform like great athletes. They are told what to do all the time. So the athleticism and the freeness of it is different. I mean, Jeter, when he got older, the reason he was still such a great shortstop is that he was in position to catch the ball. He knew where guys would probably hit the ball.
Yep.
And he just had a great instinct for it. That's baseball. You know, he knew what the pitcher, you know, he knew what the catcher called. He knew what the pitcher was going to throw. He knew what the hitter probably was going to do. Was he in the right place every time? Not the right, but did he catch what? He was in the right place as much as you could put him there, no matter what analytical stuff you did.
Mhm.
And then, you know, so I don't know. I mean, I guess some of it's good, but the information's great and the sports science is really good.
Mhm.
But there's a time and a place for everything. It's now a lot of people have been run out of the game that have a lot of knowledge because they're more instinctual and, you know, they may take everything in. And I got the reputation, you're old school, you don't. I use so much information. I watch so much tape, and I spent hours putting programs together for pitchers and, you know, dissecting hitters when we go into a series. And it was like, you know, that wasn't the information they really, and I would take I just didn't want that information to overpower a guy. And when the analytical people started going individually to the pitcher, that's when I said, you know what? If you want to interview a guy when you screw up after a game, get the analytical guy in here. Have you ever seen an interview after a game with an analytical guy?
Nope.
And, you know,
Thank you.
so now they hear this, they're going, well, you're really old school. Not true. The time and the place and the education of it all is important, and the arrogance of some of it. You know, it used to be you're an old school coach and you're arrogant about what you're doing. Now you're no longer there, but they're so arrogant about this stuff that it's off the charts. And I there's nobody that can say anything.
I can't help but think of reading Joe Madden's book and talking about the imposition of the front office coming, even into the locker room. And knowing, if you're looking at Joe's history, he was already incorporating analytics long
Yep.
before anybody else was calling it analytics.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
he also had the sense of saying, you got to trust your gut too. You
Mm-hmm.
got to take all that experience and knowledge that you have of the game and trust, what's going to happen beyond it. You can't just pull out a slide rule for all of it. You do need to be attentive to those things, but you don't let them drive every moment of the game. And
Well,
that takes it away.
it's interesting because, you know, as soon as Joe talked about what happened in Anaheim, he can't get another job.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's because, look, I know we're both older, but he has a lot, you know, he had a lot of knowledge. And to take that out of the game, it's kind of a shame. And he was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he makes a couple of comments and he's behind the times. He's old school and he can't be hired because he can't be controlled to the degree they want to control. And it shouldn't be about control. It should be about, you know, sharing the information. And, you know, Buck Showalter, the same thing at the Mets. His first year, he was a genius. Second year, all this stuff started happening. And he started trying to, unbuck like, trying to be, you know, play that game. And it didn't work. And he ended up getting fired. And I know to this day, he really regrets doing that. And if he ever manages again, it won't happen. But you're hiring a lot of young managers in the game. I mean, this winter was something. And, you know, look, I don't know how they're going to do. They might be great at what they do. But to take guys with the history of the game out of the game,
Yeah.
it's just, it's a shame because that is the game. You know, people want to see those people. And, you know, they want to see Lou go out and argue. They want to see an Earl Weaver. They want to see a Jim Leyland. Like, you don't have that. Even Ozzie again, he was a character. And
Yeah.
there's like, who's a character in the game anymore?
Jeez.
Right.
But it's not, look, if you can't do the job, then being a character doesn't matter. You're going to be Max Peckin. You're going to be the clown prince of baseball. But if you're doing the job and, you're into it, your passion is such, and you show it, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, Billy Martin was really, really smart.
Mhm.
His passion took him overboard and some other stuff, but
I will say that every franchise seems to go through their moments where they feel they have to go back to that core knowledge in baseball. And the two names that I would bring up are Dusty Baker and Bruce Bochy, both of whom had sort of like stepped away for a while and then came back and were resurrected and really you could tell right away as soon as they showed up, it instilled a confidence in the entire team that didn't exist before they arrived. So
let players play.
why it doesn't happen more often, to be honest.
You've gotten younger, mostly front offices, especially around. You've got most of the analytical people are in their 20s, maybe very early 30s, and then, and I laugh because I'm waiting for AI to replace every one of them. Honest to God, like think about it.
No, yeah.
Think about what they do.
Yeah.
Like that's what AI does.
Well, I know computer programmers are disappearing right now. So I can see where analytics guys could go just as quickly.
I mean, you keep one guy that can, set the program up or do whatever, keep an eye on it, but you don't have to pay him health insurance. You don't have, it all goes away. And I would bet anything in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years it's completely changed.
The day they figure out an AI that can prevent injuries,
that's
going to be cool.
That's interesting because I've talked to a guy that really knows what he's doing with it, and I said we need to get all the numbers for all the pitchers for the last 10 years from every organization, and try to put together a program that is going to tell you what has happened. I'm just eyeballing it. What we talked about earlier, the way practice is done now is different. The game's faster. The ball's throwing harder. We put more on, get your A swing off, throw the fastball as hard as you can. Everything's geared towards that. So you're going to have injuries. I mean, so how do we prevent that? It's the mentality of an organization. It's going to take baseball is a copycat business. That's what it is. And it always has been. When somebody does well, you talk to them and then you try to copy it. The Rays were the forefront of all this with the shift and the opener. And, there's a few things. And when I was at the Yankees, I used to I guess I was kidding our guys, but I'd say, why do we have 500 of these guys and they've got 10 and they're at the forefront of all this stuff? Like, why is that?
Voices drown each other out when there's too many of them.
It's interesting because I think the game's going to have to go through you're going to have to start in the minor. It's going to take an organization that says, look, give me 3 years, we'll develop pitching, but here's how we're going to do it. Take all the machines, use them for the knowledge in between. If you want to work on a delivery thing, point it out, but one thing. And let's work on that. And at the end, we're going to throw the ball the way we can.
You've been listening to part 1 of the interview with Larry Rothschild. Twice a coach with World Series winning teams the Marlins and the Reds. Plus he was manager of the inaugural Tampa Bay Devil Rays baseball team. Pitching coach for several MLB teams, including the Atlanta Braves, Florida Marlins, Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, New York Yankees, and San Diego Padres. Join us again next week for part 2 of Larry and his baseball journey and vision. Just a reminder, if you enjoyed this show, go ahead, like, and subscribe to Baseball Biz on Deck. You may also find Baseball Biz on Deck on YouTube, at iHeartApple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at baseballbizondeck.com. Also, you can find Matt at matgermain.bskysocial. That's Matt at matgermain.b Sky Social, or Mark at baseballbizondeck.bskysocial and Baseball Biz on Deck with Facebook.